Israel saw this as an act of war and began to mobilize. In fact, Hawks and the Israeli government had been waiting for a showdown with the Arabs. Both sides now prepared for war. Soon to be caught up in this was the USS LIberty. Her commander, William L. McGonigal, had been in the Navy since World War II. The crew included highly trained code breakers and radio experts, like Dave Lewis.
I was the research officer on the research ship. The commanding officer drove the ship. The executive officer was his assistant, and I was in charge of the 195 security group personnel. We were sent around the world wherever there might be a hot spot to see if we could determine what was going on and if the United States desired any intervention of any sort.
Life aboard the USS LIberty was like no other naval life. And in the 1960s, ships of that ilk operated independently. The commanding officer of the USS America, which was the flagship of the Sixth Fleet, didn't keep track of a ship that was sailing all by itself. When we were off duty, when the sailors were off duty, we went up topside and sunbathed. I mean, we wore pressed, starched, creased uniforms and spit-shine shoes, and our fingernails were never dirty. I mean, we were slick.
McGonigal, he was a terrific person. We always on Sunday had a cookout on the fantail of the ship. Being aboard the ship was really something. It was fun, like going from Abidjan, Ivory Coast, all the way down to Cape Town. You're drifting along at 3 knots and listening 10 miles off the coast.
When the LIberty pulled into Abidjan, that was a social event of the year. I got back aboard at 2 o'clock in the morning the day we left. I was met at the gangway by Captain McGonigal, who informed me that we had orders to get underway immediately, and I was to get the rest of the troops, and we were getting underway.
In a sudden change of mission, the ship was ordered to head for the Middle East. "5,000 miles away in Washington, Israel's hardline spy master, Meir Amit, was making a secret visit to his friends in the CIA and the Pentagon. Amit's key meeting was with Robert McNamara, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Amit wanted to know whether the Americans would back Israel if it struck the first blow. But the two men have very different memories of their encounter.
I told him, look, we don't want even one soldier from you. All what we want from you to stop the Russian coming into the arena, and number 2, to help us after the war. So when I finished, he asked me 2 questions. 1, how long it will take? I said 1 week. How many casualties? I told him less than the War of Independence. So I asked him, Mr. Secretary, what do you advise to me? Can I go home now or stay here until things will clear up? He said, no, you go home, your place is there now. I drew the conclusion that it was a green light.
Absolutely not. Because at that point, President Johnson and I and Dean Rusk had fully agreed that we must keep the U.S. in a position where if Israel called on us for military assistance to turn back the attack by Egypt and possibly turn back an attack by Egypt with the support of the Soviet Union, we had to be in a position that we could obtain the support of the American people and the Congress for applying military force in support of Israel. And we would not have that support if Israel had attacked Egypt. So our position was, no, don't initiate the attack. And I have no basis for believing that the Israeli you spoke of received any other indication from me than that.
That same night, a young NSA linguist named Alan Blue was suddenly dispatched to join the Liberty.
He was called in the middle of the night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, and he left the house. He went to NSA, and at noon the next day, he was on a plane to Rota, Spain. I'd never seen him that way. He was almost teary. He clung to me like he didn't when he had taken prior trips.
Alan Blue met the ship at the Spanish port of Rota. By now, the crew had been told they were heading for the Gaza Strip.
We knew that from the daily news that the Arab-Israeli situation was getting more and more hostile. That so far there was no war, but it looked to anybody who read the newspapers that there would soon be a war, and so we were sent out there, obviously, to listen to what was going on.
Early on the morning of Monday, the 5th of June, Israel went to war. Its planes pounded airfields in Sinai and the Suez Canal zone, destroying most of Egypt's air force.
These are the original shots taken by the gun cameras during the attacks on the Arab airfields.
The fact is that they didn't have a clue when we came on. They were completely caught by surprise. They were having breakfast, or immediately after breakfast, some coffee, and boof, up we came on 9 airfields, 2 in the Sinai, 5 in Egypt, and 2 in Upper Egypt. And then we had the second round, and the third round, and the fourth round.
Once again, the actual aerial combat shots taken by the Israeli gun cameras.
Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was boosting its military presence near the war zone. It moved 20 warships into the eastern Mediterranean. In response, the Pentagon ordered the 6th Fleet to keep all aircraft and ships at least 100 miles away from the coast. But one vessel received no such message. The USS LIberty steamed on towards the Sinai coast.
We were told there was no need to worry. We had asked Commander 6th Fleet for an armed guard to go along with us, a destroyer. He sent the message back saying we were in international waters, flying the American ensign. There was no need for an armed escort.
The LIberty was approaching a scene of total Israeli victory. On the 3rd day of the war, they'd taken the West Bank. But the big prize was the capture of Jerusalem's old city.
I was elated when I heard it. Jerusalem, every Jew prays, I think, every day, next year in Jerusalem.
That evening, the LIberty arrived at her destination, off the Sinai coast. Thursday, the 8th of June, dawned fine and clear. But the war was still raging, and Israeli planes flew out from the Sinai Peninsula to check on the LIberty.
Reveille was at 6. You got up, you showered and everything, and you go for a chow. But before that, we had heard that, like at 5 in the morning, or around that time, that the planes were buzzing us.
The Israeli aircraft seemed to be identifying the ship as belonging to their ally, America.
There were about 9 different occasions that airplanes came out, and probably 12 times that were circled, 12 separate orbits of the ship during the morning.